Hi, I've taken a taxi here in Nairobi and my driver needs to fuel, so that's why we've come to this filling station. But this is not your regular gas filling station, where you fill your car with either diesel or petrol. It's quite literally a gas station, only dealing with autogas. That's liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, for vehicles. In January of 2016, petrol was retailing at 88 shillings a litre in Nairobi. In January 2020, it was at about 111 shillings. Come January 2025, a litre was going for 176 shillings. But as the fuel prices go up, motorists, especially those in the taxi business, have been exploring ways to keep their transport costs down. One of them is switching to LPG, whose price is comparatively cheaper and stable.
Hiyo ndio valve yake ya kuweka.
Yeah.
So tangi yake iko mahara hapa.
Hapa kulikuwa na spare tire.
Hii ndio tangi yake sasa.
Hii capacity yake ni?
Capacity hii ni 42 liters.
42 liters.
Yeah.
Depending on, sasa hiyo inategemea na vile umekuja
na size ya nini. Ukiwa space ya gari iko kubwa unaweza wekea 52.
Okay.
Unaweza wekea 100. Kuna ingine ndogo zaidi ya hii. 20 something 23 liters. Kuna 22, kuna 32, kuna 42 kwenda hivyo sasa mpaka 100.
Ni wewe unakuja na hizi tank na hii equipment yote? Ama
No.
ni wao wali?
Easy. First of all, lazima nilipokuwa nikitaka kuwekea hizi nini gas, nilipeleka gari kwanza ipimwe. Kuna vitu wanaitwa valve. Kama hii iko na valve mbili, kama iko na moja yesi wekwa. Kama iko na mbili ndio inawekwa. So walipopima yangu wakaona iko sawa, ndio walinistoria hii. So si kuitishwa hata shilingi moja. Ila tu niliambiwa kama niko na 50,000 cash, ninaweza wapa na mimi niwe nikiweka gas kwa less lita moja na less na shilingi 10. So wakati ambao niliinstoliwa hii kitu, wakati huo gas ilikuwa 95 shillings per liter. Yes. Ikiwa umeinstoliwa na kampuni. Lakini kama umelipa ilikuwa ni 85, unalipa less na 10 pop. So from there,
but at the time hiyo ilikuwa kampuni nyingine. Sasa vile kama hii
ilikuwa ni kampuni moja tu, ambayo inaitwa autogas.
Okay.
Ilikuwa Kambara Road wakati huo.
Okay. Yeah. Na sasa ndio zimekuwa mingi.
Sasa zimekuwa mingi
kwa every other station.
Yeah, kila mahali.
Okay. Yeah. As for the fueling, the car is first attached to a grounding wire and the fuel dispenser is connected to this inlet at the rear bumper. The rest is just like with your regular filling station. The driver says how much they want to top up in terms of cost and the attendant keys it in at the pump.
Tangi moja ya gas unajaza na 42 liters. So 42 by 115 na upige 177 by 42. Unaona kuna hiyo tofauti.
Yes.
So hiyo ndio inanisaidia.
John says since switching to LPG in October 2021, a litre of gas has only gone from 95 to 100 shillings, then to 116 and down to 115 as of April 2025. A litre gives him about 12 kilometers. Per month, his average running costs have gone down by over 10,000 shillings.
Kilometers na mafuta na gas ni sawa. Okay. Tofauti ni pesa.
Okay.
Na
consumption is the same.
Ni same.
Kama ni 12 ni 12 kilometers per liter. Okay.
Tofauti ya mafuta na nini ni kwamba inapika haraka. Inachukua.
Mafuta ndio inapika haraka.
Nini gas inachukua haraka. So inakimbia.
Okay. Still, he says he has not dumped petrol altogether. One needs to have some petrol to start the car before it automatically switches to gas. The same applies when they run out of gas. The car automatically begins running on petrol. Additionally, a driver gets a switch for turning the LPG system off entirely. One of the issues with modifying one's car is getting insurance coverage. Some insurance argue that such modifications compromise the safety of vehicles, offering only third-party policies which cover neither the driver nor the car in the case of an accident. John says he has not had any issues with getting a comprehensive cover for his car.
Mimi tangu niweke, nilikuwa na comprehensive. Yeah. Na sikuwa isumbwana na wao. Maana watu wa autogas walikuwa insured kila kitu.
Mitchell Goes, a Nairobi-based vehicle design engineer, explains what really happens to make a car run on LPG.
So the biggest component of the system is obviously the LPG tank. It's usually mounted in your boot. you might have to give up the space that is used for your spare tire, but it depends on the vehicle. Some vehicles don't have a complicated rear axle, so they can actually hide the tank below the boot. Okay, then from the tank you have your high pressure lines that lead to injectors that are actually a part of your intake system. So that's the original intake system that they modify, add the injectors in. Then in terms of delivery, what happens is they add an ECU, electronic control unit, and that relies on sensors that are on the existing engine. It essentially judges the mixture of your fuel as it's in the combustion chamber, calculates how much adjustment it needs to make when the LPG is being injected essentially, and it continuously adjusts based on your driving cycle.
And assume that has to do something with a converter or something.
Exactly. So another critical component is essentially a converter. So what that does is it converts your liquid fuel to a vapor form so that it can be burnt. When it's in its liquid state, it's too dense actually to combust under compression. So it needs to be vaporized. There are modern systems that use a liquid injection system, but the control system is a lot smarter. So what we have in Kenya currently is the older system that pre-vaporizes the LPG before it injects it. You can't completely eliminate the petrol part of your engine because the engine needs to get to a reasonable temperature before the LPG, the vaporized LPG, can combust. Okay, so converting it to vapor improves how much petrol you essentially need to warm up the engine.
Does that mean it's consuming lesser when it's LPG? Yes. The consumption is lower.
Exactly.
That kind of a thing.
The consumption of your petrol will be lower, but remember that you're just replacing it with another fuel. So yeah, you have a second tank and your fuel economy will improve on two fronts, because number one, you're reducing how much petrol is required by the engine, and number two, LPG has a better burn efficiency. So when you're mixing it with your petrol, even the amount of LPG you're mixing will be less than your petrol consumption. And obviously LPG is cheaper.
It's cheaper, yeah.
So when you do all the maths, it works out to be more economical. Yeah.
And how does that come to play where they're saying if it's automated in a sort of way where if the driver runs out of gas, the LPG, it just picks up the petrol and continues.
Exactly.
It won't stop.
So there will be a pressure sensor as well somewhere in the system, usually on the tank. So it can detect when your tank is near empty or completely empty, and just tells the ECU, so that's the ECU for the LPG system, that hey, we're out of fuel, so now switch back to petrol. And then at that stage, obviously then the car is just operating like its normal self. The original ECU of the computer is now controlling your petrol. So a lot of the vehicles do have a manual cutoff switch, because maybe the other issue with LPG is you might lose a bit of power. So some drivers do want to be able to switch off the system entirely, maybe in an overtaking scenario, or they're doing a short distance so they don't see the value in using the LPG, so they use that switch.
LPG powered cars are not a new phenomenon. This technology goes back to the 19th century, but mainstream use of autogas came in the 1970s. This is especially for taxis, notably in the Netherlands and Italy. A number of car manufacturers like Ford, Toyota, Volvo and VW have also what's known as biofuel models.
I think it was just a case of demand. A lot of countries where natural gas is abundant, you'll see the LPG system or even a CNG system be more popular over there. But as a global standard, petrol was, and also diesel was in such high demand that the market just shifted to use the fuel that was already readily available. But obviously there's advantages and disadvantages. You can't run the LPG system without a petrol system. So it was sort of chicken and egg, right? They could have developed engines that run entirely on LPG or CNG, but I think we wouldn't be reaching the power levels that we do right now, or even the range. So I think that's really why the market is now coming back to it. If it's not done well, there is a risk. And in any scenario where you add an additional system, you're increasing your risk. So I don't think the fuel type essentially is the risk, but how it's integrated into the vehicle. I think that OEMs are not doing it in their original models purely because it's a bit more complicated to integrate than a petrol system, right? The LPG tanks and CNG tanks are pressure vessels, so in the event of an accident, they do have the opportunity to explode. Obviously, we have systems like one-way valves, so if it detects a sudden increase in pressure, the valve deploys so that you don't have an explosion. But obviously, it is a bit harder to pass your crash tests when you're using a high pressure vessel.
Yeah.
So I think that the risks associated are more to do with the amount of maintenance now. Essentially, it's not double, but you've added another system that needs to be cared for. So I think that's the major risk for people that are integrating right now.
And how about expansion with heat, the way with like gas, the regular gas cylinders? Does that mean one needs to not fuel it to the maximum?
No, I don't think it should be an issue, because the wall of the tank is pretty thick. I think 3 mm is usually the standard. So the expansion of the gas really doesn't affect the pressure vessel. Yeah.
And in the long run, does this aftermarket modification affect the quality of the engine and the engine health rather?
So theoretically, when you're doing a petrol to LPG conversion or addition, your engine will actually have a better longevity. Why is that? In petrol, there's a lot of carbon. When you burn it, it deposits in the engine. Whereas when you're burning LPG, you're getting less carbon deposit. So your engine should actually last for longer.
Closer to home on the African continent, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is actually encouraging motorists to convert their cars into compressed natural gas power as the cost of petrol goes up. In addition to the lower costs, autogas use reduces CO2 exhaust emissions by around 15% compared to petrol, which is why it is widely promoted as a green alternative.
I think the world is going electric.
Yeah.
We all know that, we've all seen it. But it's very wasteful to give up our existing vehicles, right? A lot of taxi drivers especially, it's an asset for them, right? So keeping it on the road for as long as possible is important, but also when they're driving that amount of mileage, once the LPG system is integrated, it actually reduces their carbon emissions. So it's a good step. Instead of giving up your vehicle for an electric and spending a ton of money on it, if you're worried about the green aspect of it, I think LPG is also good for that.
The rise in LPG car conversion comes at a time when hybrid cars are increasing in the Kenyan market. This combines traditional internal combustion engines with electric powertrains, also delivering on fuel economy and eco-friendliness. They're not willing to give up their cars entirely.
Exactly.
And switch to a Honda Fit hybrid or a fully EV.
Exactly,
So
because it's costly.
yeah.
It's very costly. So I think that's a very important aspect. Yeah. Also, gas is easier to obtain in comparison to liquid fuel, right? Liquid petrol. So you also think about your footprint related to the gas system. Again, comes down. Yeah. So it has a lot of advantages. I think when I look at the disadvantages, I'm even thinking about putting the system in my car. Yeah. So like you asked, can a big SUV like this? Yeah, it is capable. And I can put a much bigger tank in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So why not? Yeah.
So, will you switch to an LPG system, get a hybrid electric vehicle, or just go fully electric? Tell us in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.